Peter Obi is the leader of the Obidients movement. And during the last presidential election, the Obidients movement attacked me, and Peter Obi refused to stop them. And I believe he encouraged them to attack me. So because of that, I don't think Peter Obi will be a good leader with his team to rule Nigeria. So 2027, Peter Obi should not contest. I saw the news going and trending online on Nigerian internet space, and what could that be? That Professor Wole Soyinka said that Peter Obi don't have a good team, don't have a competent team to rule Nigeria. Now, I tried to read through the articles to understand what Professor was saying. I came to realize that this was personal. So because you feel that Peter Obi did not stop some persons to attack you, I don't really know what you did that made those people to attack you online. Because of that, such a person should not be the Nigerian president. But during the last election, the professor saw so many people that were chased out of their polling unit. Professor saw a lot of things that transpired.
If you don't be vote APC for a year, go your house. Nobody forces you down there. Go house. So if I see you vote another, I will call Luca. If I see you vote another party, go ahead our house. No control for you. This territory where you dey, na APC. Go your house. Go relax.
But he refused to speak against these things. So those people who came online, like Tinubu, to say that if they want to stop his presidency through election, that people should grab it, people should snatch it and run away with it, Professor didn't see anything wrong with such a thing. But there is something wrong with people that attacked him personally online. So I don't know how people are understanding what Professor said, because Professor is putting himself in the position of Nigeria. And this is the reason why we have a nation that cannot move. Because we have a nation where people feel that they are Nigeria. What has the rulership or leadership of a nation to do with if someone attacked you online? Now, the reason why he said Obidients attacked him, I could remember when he said that Babadati Ahmed and his people are fascists. That they said Tinubu didn't win the election and they are clamoring for Tinubu not to be sworn in as Nigerian president. Is that all? Yes, that was all. And Obidients came after him and said, don't you see that this election was rigged? Don't you see that a lot of persons were prevented not to vote during the presidential election? You saw everything that happened, but you kept quiet. You were mute. And what do you expect other people to do? Now, Babadati Ahmed came to Chinese television to say something that the Chief Justice of Nigeria shouldn't swear Tinubu in because Tinubu did not meet the constitutional requirement. Professor said that we want to carry out a coup. That Babadati Ahmed and the Obidients want to carry out a coup. Is that how to carry out a coup? That someone said they should follow the constitutional provision? I'm not surprised though, because this is the Nigeria of their dream. This is the Nigeria they have built for years with nothing to show for it. But I have a contrary opinion. I think this is not something personal as people may think, even though Professor is trying to let people know that, oh, this is personal. This is what they did to me. I think it is something that has to do with Igbo presidency.
And his Igbo makes it worse because Nigeria's DNA hates the Igbo for attempting, in the 60s and, towards the end of the 70s, to leave a country they said is no longer favorable to their existence. But I keep saying, and I will repeat here again, is there any Nigerian out there in their majority who has not mentally seceded from Nigeria?
No. I think so. It is my opinion. I might be wrong. I may be wrong about it, but I think that is what is going on. Because when you see that if anyone is associating with Peter Obi like Alex Otti, people who are the masses are loving Alex Otti, but all this political class, they hate Alex Otti. And tomorrow, if Alex Otti want to come out as president, they will also level all sort of lies and propaganda against him. Professor Wole Soyinka want Biafra to come. He want Nigeria to divide. He want, Biafra to secede out of Nigeria, but he don't want a Nigeria president to be from Igbo. I believe that there are some meanings to it. Please let me know if you think that there are some connotation about what Professor said.
And you know, just this morning, my wife sent me a proverb from Turkey that when you elect a clown and you think that he will be a king, what he does is to convert the kingdom into a circus. And I am suggesting to us that that is part of the African problem, because it starts with political hygiene. Most of Africa is suffering because we do not have democracies. We have kakistocracies. And kakistocracies are governments by our very worst. This is what we must deal with, and this is what we must say. Who do we elect into our public offices? Because, as I've said before, when you allow hyenas to take care of goats, why should you be surprised when the goats are eaten?
Now, for Professor, it is better for us to have Kakistocracy, that is the government of the worst by the worst, than for us to have someone like Peter Obi, because he feels that if Peter Obi becomes president, maybe I won't have a voice again. Is that threatening? Or let me say, is Peter Obi's ambition threatening him? Because this is how I am feeling. That what Professor really wants is, I don't want Peter Obi, not because he don't have competence to deliver, but because of, he have a group of people, he have a legion, let me call them a legion, Obidients and legion. So he has legion that nobody can even talk against him when he becomes president. Maybe this is what is threatening Professor, not because of competence as he alleged.
Oh, the African star is a demigod. Oh, Africa. We must demystify political leadership going forward. And once we do that, and I think we can do it because I can now begin to see something happening in Africa. Young Africans are beginning to ask searching questions. Africans are beginning to recognize that corruption is a cancer in our body politic. They are beginning to recognize that those who want to buy their votes don't mean well for them. They are beginning to recognize that there is enough money to change their lives if the thieves are eliminated from the political arena. They are beginning to realize that commercialization of politics is a threat to democracy. They are beginning to rise up. And I think that those who have not smelled the coffee will be surprised. They will be surprised when the ground moves from under their feet. They'll be surprised when Africa begins to elect individuals who can demonstrate that they have ideas, because the politics of the 21st century is the politics of ideas and about competition of ideas. And therefore, when one is appointed into any public office because of the demands of the electorate, and this relationship between the African member of parliament or the African president and the electorate is a symbiotic relationship. It is symbiotic in a very perverse manner. And I suspect I'm misusing the word symbiotic, but I'll use it or misuse it nevertheless, to the extent that it explains my point. What happens is that it appears that the electorate has allowed the so-called leader, because many of them are misleaders, to remain in their positions of power and to acquire as much as they can, on the understanding that periodically their loot will be shared with them. It is some kind of Robin Hoodism of a latter-day kind. And this Robin Hood kind of politics is a little bit different, at least from my understanding. Robin Hood robbed the rich in order to share with the poor. But our latter-day African Robin Hoods are in the business of robbing from the poor in order to give a pittance to the very poor. And this is what we are talking about today when we talk about commercialization. So that if you ask any typical African politician, how much does it cost you to be elected into parliament, they'll tell you it is in the millions. It is in the millions, and the millions they spend is perhaps 10 times more than they'll ever earn through their legitimate salaries. And I ask myself, if your salary in 5 years is going to be 1 billion Ugandan shillings, Why should you spend 5 billion Ugandan shillings to get into that office? There must be something that we do not see, but you see, and I know what it is. What it is that getting into the office of the Member of Parliament, or indeed any other political office in Africa, is a guarantee that things will come. So that in many African countries, the politician is the major tenderpreneur. The politician is the gatekeeper. The politician is the one who receives the guests. He is the tax collector informally, aside from the URA. And in this regard, therefore, we must commercialize politics. We may blame the politicians, but what about the electorate? The electorate also is to be blamed. The electorate has insatiable thirst and hunger for things that they have not worked for. They have been trained and they no longer listen to ideas. My good friend Norbert Mao, who I was told was here, I do not know whether he is here, will tell you, not that I have talked to him this morning, but he'll tell you that one of the pains that one has to endure when you confront your typical African electorate is to convince the electorate that ideas count for something. Many times when you address the electorate and you are waxing eloquent, telling them, when I'm elected, I'm going to ensure that we have good health services. We are going to ensure that we have good schools. We are going to ensure that we create opportunities for innovation and invention and create opportunities for young men and women. They are waiting for you to finish. They will tell you, we hear you. We know you are going to do all those beautiful things. But in the intervening period, I must eat. And therefore, no matter how beautiful your ideas are, if you don't carry money on that day, your ideas, like the elephant before them, will never fly. Leaders who, upon ascending to power in Africa, became demigods. How many of you here will forget Mobutu Sese Seko? How many of you here will forget Jean Bedel Bokassa? How many of you here will forget Samuel Doe? And then we had the emergence of guerrilla movements where people rose against their very own who had used their positions of power to destroy what had been gained over the years. And then, in those early days, you will also remember that many African leaders, including the enlightened ones, took the view that because of ethnicity, it was necessary to unite the people. And whether you are speaking from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, or Lusaka in Zambia, or Kinshasa in what was then Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, or you are speaking from Nairobi in Kenya, and here in Uganda, the clarion call was that we must have one-party states. And the justification for one-party states was that we are so disunited, there are so many ethnicities, that if we allow multi-party politics, then what would happen to us is that we would be negatively ethnicized and that we would break our countries, and that therefore, to ensure that there was unity, we needed one umbrella under whose auspices and under whose guidance the people would be united. But no sooner had we sufficiently articulated the beauty of single-party states than Western Europe told us, no, that is not democracy. Democracy means that you must have many political parties. Democracy means that you must have regular elections. Democracy means that you must have the civil society, so that our brand of democracy as we embrace it today, I dare say without fear of contradiction, was not conceived in Africa. It was conceived for us in Paris. It was conceived for us in Madrid. It was conceived for us in London. It was conceived for us in Washington. And we have swallowed it line, hook, and sinker. Africa does not tell our own story. Africa does not design what is in our best interest. Africa still waits to be told what is good and right. And I dare say that that is why Africa does not realize our potential. But yet it is also important to point out that the African and African countries are more resilient than the European states. You know, if you allow me latitude as a guest must be allowed, permit me to say this. The ethnicity that we keep on talking about, African countries are just slightly over 60 years since they regained their independence. Take Nigeria, for example, with over 500 ethnic groups created within an artificial boundary. They have had their problems, they have had their hiccups, but the nation is still alive and well. The difficulties notwithstanding. Take Uganda, for example. You've had your difficulties, you've had your trials and tribulations, but the nation is still alive and well. Tanzania, with over 136 ethnic groups, the nation is still alive and well. There is a sense in which, in the face of our difficulties, we have succeeded in managing those difficulties, however painful it has been. But look at Europe, the pontificating Europe. They cannot handle diversity. They cannot. And it's important to remind ourselves this, if only to energize ourselves. The Europeans have had to fight two major tribal wars. They called them world wars. They were tribal wars. The European tribes were at war with each other in 1914. They may have recruited a few Africans and a few other people, and then they call it World War. Then they had another major tribal war in 1939 through to 1945. They didn't call them tribal wars, they called them world wars. And I want you to look at Europe and the purity of their nation. If you go to Sweden, the nation is almost 90% composed of the Swedes, with a small lapsed population, and for that small population, they even have a separate parliament for them. That is how they handle it. You go to Finland, 90% of Finland are the Finns, with small Swedish population. You go to the Netherlands, the same. You go to England, or the Great Britain, whether it's great or not, I do not know. But it's the Great Britain. Even there, if you talk to the Scots, they have something to say about the English. If you talk to the Irish, they have something to say. If you talk to the Welsh, they have something to say. Go to Spain, where there are a few more tribes, they had a civil war. Go to Italy, largely the Italians. And you walk across to Eastern Europe. Yugoslavia was united as one nation under Joseph Broz Tito. Did they not produce many countries during our lifetime? The Soviet Union has given birth to many countries. They have gone into ethnic purity. Africa remains the only continent on earth that somehow, having had artificial boundaries imposed on her, saying that we will retain those boundaries and make the best of it. And one need only go to the pronouncements in 1963, the pronouncements of Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Kambarage Nyerere on the inviolability of the boundaries, repeated again in 1964 in Cairo, in Egypt, that if we choose to redraw these boundaries, Africa will be perpetually at conflict, and therefore heavens have given us a lemon. Let us not ask for an orange. Let us make a lemonade unto ourselves.